It didn't start with a crisis. No burnout, no breakdown, just a Tuesday afternoon, an email, a meeting request, and something in me quietly said, "Not this time." I stared at the screen, not with panic, but with clarity. I didn't owe them everything. I didn't owe anyone everything. And for the first time, I didn't apologize for it. That moment, the moment I chose peace over performance, wasn't loud, but it was the beginning of everything. There's a moment you don't see coming, not because it's loud, but because it's quiet. A moment when you hear yourself say yes for the 100th time and something in your body doesn't move. Something in your chest stays still. Something in your stomach drops, not in fear, but in recognition. Recognition that you're not agreeing because you want to, but because you don't know how not to. And that was the beginning for me. Not a crisis, not a breakdown, just a slow, unsettling awareness that I had given away too many pieces of myself in the name of being agreeable, helpful, needed, and I wish I could say I saw it all clearly in one flash, but I didn't. I had to live through it over and over, saying yes to the late meeting, the extra task, the thing I didn't have space for, and each time I did it, I shrank a little, not because they asked too much, but because I didn't know how to say enough, and when people praised me for how responsive I was, how reliable I'd become, all I could feel was the ache of being depleted and the weight of a schedule I didn't control. And what hurt most wasn't the demand. It was my own inability to choose something different. And that's when I started asking myself questions I had avoided for years. What do I actually want? Why do I feel guilty when I choose myself? Who am I when I stop trying to earn everyone's approval? And the answers didn't come quickly, but the silence that followed those questions was louder than any yes I'd ever said. The first no didn't sound like rebellion. It didn't come with fire or a slammed door. It sounded like silence, like waiting 5 minutes before replying to a message, like rereading the request 3 times and realizing that I didn't have to explain why I couldn't. I could just not. And that was a revelation, that not everything needed a backstory. Not every boundary needed to be padded with an apology. And still, when I finally typed it out, "I won't be able to take this on right now," my hand shook because it wasn't just about this moment. It was about every moment before this. Every time I said yes when I meant no. Every time I swallowed my discomfort so someone else wouldn't feel theirs. Every time I thought that being kind meant being available, and when the response came back, "Thanks for letting me know," I felt the world tilt a little, not because of what they said, but because of what they didn't say. There was no disappointment, no judgment, just space, and it hit me. I had been carrying the fear of letting people down like a full backpack, walking miles in shoes that blistered me just to avoid one uncomfortable reaction. And now that it didn't come, I didn't know what to do with the quiet. I just sat there, stunned by the simplicity of it, the freedom in the nothingness, and for the first time, I understood that no can be calm, no can be kind, no can be enough. But the second no didn't come easier, because guilt is a clever thing. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It shows up in the pause after you hit send, in the way you replay the words you used, wondering if they sounded cold or distant or too final. It lingers in your chest when you walk away from the conversation and start imagining the worst, that they're upset, that you've disappointed them, that they'll never ask again. And even when none of that is true, the feeling doesn't disappear, because we've been trained to believe that being needed is proof that we matter, And when we say no, it feels like stepping off the map, like entering a place where worth is no longer tethered to service, and that can feel disorienting, even terrifying. And I remember walking through that fear like walking through a fog, unable to see what was ahead, just trusting that there was something more than obligation waiting on the other side. And sometimes the fear would win. I'd cave. I'd take something on I didn't want to. I'd feel the pull of my old patterns. But slowly, quietly, another voice began to rise inside me, softer than guilt, but steadier, it said. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are not cruel for honoring your energy. You are not unkind for having limits. And the more I listened to that voice, the more I realized how rarely I'd heard it before. And something unexpected happened after that. The space that guilt used to fill began to open, not all at once, but slowly, like sunlight creeping into a room you didn't realize had a window. And in that space, I found time I didn't know I had. I found breath. I found choices. And not just about what I was doing, but how I was being. Because saying no wasn't just about rejecting tasks. It was about reimagining who I was without the constant background noise of everyone else's needs. And at first, that space felt uncomfortable, too quiet, too unproductive, too unfamiliar. Because I was used to measuring my days by how much I gave, how much I juggled, how little I needed. But now, I had to ask different questions. What do I want to give my energy to? Who am I when I'm not performing usefulness? And slowly, without even trying, I started making different choices. I started finishing things I cared about and leaving unread messages that could wait. I started taking walks without my phone and not feeling guilty about the time it took. I started saying yes to the things that felt aligned, not obligated. And even though the world around me didn't change, the way I moved through it did. Because now my actions weren't reactive, they were intentional, not rushed, but rooted, not performative, but present. And I realized that peace isn't always a matter of slowing down. It's a matter of choosing with clarity, and that clarity comes from the courage to stop running from silence. But here's the truth that's hardest to sit with. Not everyone will understand. Not everyone will clap when you choose your limits. Some will call it distance. Some will call it selfishness. Some will ask why you've changed when all you've done is stopped overextending. And it hurts. Not because they're always wrong, but because sometimes they're people you love, people you've shown up for 100 times before, people who've come to expect your yes like clockwork. And the first time you don't give it, it rattles something in them, and sometimes they'll say it out loud, and sometimes they'll just go quiet. And both can leave you wondering if you've done the right thing. But in that ache is a powerful question. Do I want my value to be based on compliance or connection, on obligation or honesty? And for me, it was a wake-up call. I could keep being agreeable and feel resentful, or I could be clear and risk being misunderstood. And neither option was easy, but only one gave me back my sense of self. And what I learned is that healthy relationships might wobble when you set new boundaries, but they don't collapse. They adapt. They grow. And the ones that don't weren't built on respect. They were built on expectation. And expectation without respect is a cage dressed as community. And I didn't want to live in that anymore, even if it meant walking alone for a while. What no one told me about boundaries is that they are not walls, they are doors, with locks you can open or close based on trust, capacity, season, and what I had to learn over time is that the most powerful boundaries don't sound harsh. They sound clear. They sound like, I'm not available for that right now, or let me think about it and get back to you, or That's not something I can take on this time. And at first, I thought clarity would make people upset. But what actually made things worse before was my hesitation, my over-explaining, my apologizing for having limits in the first place. And the more I practiced saying no without shrinking, the more I realized I didn't need to argue for my peace. I just needed to claim it. And that kind of communication, when it comes from a grounded place, doesn't push people away. It builds trust, because people start to understand where you begin and where they end. And that's not rejection, that's safety. And over time, I noticed something strange. People began to respect my time more, not because I demanded it, but because I modeled it. And I stopped attracting so many emergencies disguised as opportunities, and started aligning with those who understood reciprocity, not just need. And every time I spoke from that place, the guilt got quieter. Not because it disappeared, but because it didn't have room to lead anymore. I used to believe generosity meant saying yes, that the more I gave, the kinder I was. But the truth is, generosity without discernment becomes depletion. And what I learned through practice, through failure, through fatigue, through friction, is that saying no is not the opposite of kindness. It's the foundation of sustainable care. Because when you give from resentment, it doesn't land as love. It lands as obligation. And that's a weight no one wants to carry. Not the giver, not the receiver. And it took me years to realize that one well-placed no could preserve more trust, more energy, more self-respect than 10 exhausted yeses. And it wasn't about becoming selfish. It was about becoming whole, about recognizing that I had needs too, that I couldn't be everything to everyone and still have anything left for myself. And once I saw that, once I felt what it was like to give from fullness instead of emptiness, I never wanted to go back, because suddenly my yes became sacred, not automatic, and people began to feel the difference, not just in how I showed up, but in how deeply I could stay, and that changed everything. Not because I had more time, but because I had more presence. And presence is the most generous thing we can ever offer. So here's what I know now. Not as a perfect boundary setter, but as someone who finally learned to listen to the quiet voice beneath the noise. Saying no isn't a hard wall. It's a soft return to self. It's the moment you choose your alignment over approval, your well-being over performance, your clarity over chaos. And it's not easy, because the world rewards burnout disguised as commitment, urgency masked as purpose, overextension dressed as devotion. But what I've learned is that a quiet, grounded no can be more revolutionary than 1,000 loud yeses. And in that stillness, you start to remember who you were before the expectations took over. Who you were when presence was enough, when your value wasn't measured by your availability, but by your truth. And maybe that's the real power. Not just saying no, but doing it without guilt, without apology, without shrinking into a version of yourself who needed permission to rest, to pause, to choose differently. And if that sounds radical, it's only because we've been told too long that sacrifice is virtue and that boundaries are cold. But I'm telling you now, boundaries are warm. Boundaries are love. Boundaries are what let you stay whole in a world that constantly pulls you apart. And if you remember nothing else, remember this. You are allowed to protect your energy, to choose peace, to honor your time, not because you've earned it, but because you are already enough. And your no is not rejection. It's redirection. It's you remembering that your life belongs to you and no one else.